Welcome back, everybody. In episode 5, we are getting into one of the most useful tools in programming, functions. They let you group your code, reuse it, and keep things tidy. It's like saving yourself from doing the same task over and over. Think about it. Writing a greeting paragraph 100 times would be really exhausting, but with a function, you can write it once and just call it whenever you need. Simple and efficient. Today we're going to be discussing what functions are and how functions are used in Lua. And if you're working through this course and want a certificate at the end, check out coding.com, the link is in the description. Alright, let's make your code cleaner and more powerful. Let's get into it. So first of all, what are functions? A function is like a recipe. It takes some ingredients called parameters, mixes them together, that is, it does some work, and then it gives you a result, that is the return value. So this allows you to write a piece of code once and reuse it as many times as you want. Think of it like this. You don't have to bake the same cake every time you want to eat it. Once you've got a good bakery, that is a function, you can just place an order and get the same delicious result every single time. And all of that without having to do all of the work yourself. So let's see how you define a function in Lua. In Lua, you define a function with the function keyword, followed by the name of the function, and a pair of parentheses that hold any parameters, which are optional of course, and at the end of the function, you'll use the end keyword to close it off. So, let's define a function with the function keyword called sayHello. And after we define a function, we write the code to be executed below it, and let's say this function prints hello world. Simple as that. And after we are done with our function code, we end the function with the end keyword. So this function is pretty simple. It just prints out hello world every time it is called. And in order to call and use a function, you just have to type out its name followed by a set of parentheses. So this is calling the function. Now let's run and see what this function outputs to. So it outputs to hello world since we are calling the function and the function prints out hello world. Pretty simple, right? Now that was the simplest way that you can use a function. And that of course means that there are other ways that you can use a function. So you can also use functions by using parameters. So think of them as ingredients in a recipe. These are values that you pass into a function to influence its behavior. And here's a function that takes a name as a parameter and prints a personalized greeting. So function greet, and we'll pass in name as a parameter. So print hello, and then our concatenation operator dot dot, and the parameter that we passed in, that is name. And let's say we have an exclamation mark as well, and we'll end this function, and then we get to call it with different arguments. So suppose Alice, and then greet Sam. So in this function that we defined, name is a parameter, and this means that we can use this name variable anywhere inside the function. So you can pass in different values like Alice or Sam each time you call the function, and they will be used in place of the name variable. So the values that we pass inside a function when calling it are called arguments. And let's run this code to see what it outputs to. So hello Alice, so in place of name this sends Alice, and this sends Sam. So hello Alice and hello Sam. So that was it about parameters and arguments of a function. Now let's get to the topic of returning values. One of the coolest things about function is that they can return values. This means that they can give you a result after performing some operation. For example, let's create a function that adds two numbers and returns the result. So function add, in place of the parameters we'll use a and b, which are the two numbers to be added. Let's say it returns a value of a plus b, and let's end the function. So let's say we want to store a sum of 5 and 3. inside this sum variable. So we'll use the function add to add 5 and 3. And if we print sum, it should give us the sum. So you might have guessed what is happening right here. Oh, I'm sorry, it should be B. So you might have guessed what is happening here. 5 is going inside this function in place of A, and 3 is going inside this function in place of B. So it returns a value of 5 plus 3. So this should print out to 8. And let's see if our function has worked as intended. So 8. So clearly our function works as intended. It takes two parameters A and B, and it returns the sum of those two numbers using the return keyword. So fun fact, functions in Lua don't have to return anything. You can just use them for their side effects, like printing something onto the screen without returning a value at all. And on the other hand, sometimes a function needs to return more than one value. In Lua, you can easily return multiple values from a function. So you can check this out with a function called get min and max. So let's say this also takes two parameters A and B, and if A is greater than B, then it returns first of all B, our minimum value, and A, our maximum value. Else it returns our A as our minimum value and B as the maximum value. So once again it's B. And let's end our if statement first with the end statement, and then our function with another end statement. So this is for our if statement, and this is for our function. So I hope that's clear. Now let's say we have to store our minimum and maximum value in two variables called min max, and these values will be provided by our get min max function. So let's say 10 and 20, and we'll print min and then concatenation operator, our minimum value, and then max, and then our maximum value. So turns out I've made a small mistake. It should be returned right here, and let's see how this function will output. So as expected, since our minimum value is 10 and maximum value is 20, it outputs to min 10 and max 20. So this function was about returning more than one values. Here two values are being returned, one for the minimum, one for the maximum. And now let's talk about assigning functions to variables. A small segment. Functions in Lua are first-class citizens, which means that you can assign them to variables, pass them as arguments to other functions, and even return them from other functions. So I'll give you a small example to demonstrate what I'm saying. Local say hi. Let's say this is our variable which will store our function. And this will take our name as a parameter, and then it will print out, since the function is called say hi, let's say hi, and then concatenate our name, and then an exclamation mark. So this is a simple example just to showcase that functions can be assigned to variables as well in Lua. So say hi, let's say Charlie. So it should print out to hi Charlie. So hi Charlie. Here we assign a function to a variable called say hi, and then we can call it just like any other function with the variable name. So that was it about assigning functions to variables. And now we'll have a look at a topic called recursive functions, a function that calls itself. So a recursive function is a function that calls itself to solve a problem. This is often used in situations where a problem can be broken down into smaller and smaller sub-problems. So let's take a look at an example of factorial using recursion. A factorial is a product of all positive integers that are less than or equal to a number. For example, 5 factorial, this is the symbol for factorial, should equal to 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. So this is how a factorial works. And here's how to calculate the factorial of a number recursively. So we'll remove this function altogether to create a function called Factorial, which will take n, as in our number, as a parameter. So inside the function we'll write a logic. If n is equal to 0, then return 1, and else return the number n times the factorial, that is our factorial function, of a numbers that is 1 smaller than our given number. So this part is calling the function again, and then end our if statement, and then end our function. So let's say I have to print the factorial of 3, which is simply 6, because 3's factorial is 3 times 2 times 1, which is equal to 6. Now this should give out 6. So I'll explain to you what is happening in this code right here. So let me just copy this code and create a text bubble. So what is happening here is, if we pass in 3, don't mind my handwriting, if we pass in 3 inside this n, that is in place of the n parameter, so it will check if n, that is 3, is equal to 0. So since it is not equal to 0, it will go to our else condition, which will return n, that is 3, times the factorial function again, but this time the parameter is n minus 1, which is 2. This n will stay as it is, that is our 3 will stay as it is, but this factorial function will trigger once again. So it will go inside this function, and remember our parameter here is n minus 1, which is equal to 2. So since 2 is not equal to 0, it will go to our else condition once again. It will return n, that is 2, times again this factorial function. So each time a smaller value is being passed into our factorial function, and this factorial function is being called again and again. So it will result in 3 times 2 times our factorial function. So it will check n minus 1, that is 2 minus 1, so it will equal to 1. So since this is still not equal to 0, it will return 1. And then the function triggers once again, and this time 1 minus 1 will equal to 0, so it will finally return 1. So it will return 1, and all of this will be returned by our initial function that was called. So 3 times 2 times 1 times 1, that is equal to 6, so it will return the factorial exactly. So I hope you could understand this factorial function well. The gist is that unless and until we have a breaking condition, that is n equal to 0, this function will be called again and again, and this will basically result in our value, or our required value, to be returned. So hope that is clear from this example. And that was basically it for this video about functions in Lua. Now it's time to test your function skills. So here's a challenge for you guys. So your challenge is to create a simple calculator program with functions for addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And bonus, you can allow the user to choose an operation and input 2 numbers. You can simulate this using variables for now. So if you like the video or found this video helpful, please drop a like and subscribe to our channel for more such videos. And in the next episode, we're going to be discussing about tables in Lua. So do make sure you tune in. And until then, bye bye.